This story comes from the so-called legacy media, the lamestream media. So don't actually go to the original story. Go to the archive link. That's so that they don't get any ad revenue from you reading the original version. These people need to be strangled, financially speaking, monetarily. So like Steve Martin's character in The Jerk, Isaac Bailey was born a poor black child. But unlike Steve Martin's character in The Jerk, Isaac Bailey is ashamed of that. So let's start out with the title, Stop Shaming Poor People. If you read the piece, it's really not about shaming poor people, it's about shaming people for using food stamps. So we've experienced our first rhetorical turn. The author has presented us one fact, which is something about poor people is wrong, but what he's actually talking about is something different. He goes from poor people to food stamps. If you read the piece, you'll find out that he's not actually talking about shaming people who are on food stamps. He's talking about shaming himself. Isaac Bailey, as a child who was too young to know anything about big political discourses, he was personally ashamed of using food stamps. So he probably should have written this to himself, read it, and then thrown it away, but instead CNN has published it for all of us to read. So Isaac Bailey is kind of schizophrenic on this issue. He doesn't want poor people to be ashamed of using food stamps to feed themselves, but at the same time, he probably doesn't want anyone to be on food stamps. So he has an inherently poor view of poverty, and he has an inherently poor view of the necessity of using food stamps, but at the same time, he doesn't want to attach any negative feeling or negative assessment to that situation. So can he do that? Probably not. That's not the way that human minds work. There's a difference between saying that somebody is 100% to blame for the situation they're in and saying that their situation is a bad one and that they need to hurry up and get out of it as soon as possible. Based on your views of human agency, you're probably going to fall into one of two camps. If you're a leftist, if you're a progressive, and if you're interested in identity politics, you're probably going to say that systemic factors are the reason why all these people are on food stamps and the reason why they're not going to get off of food stamps, and you're not going to blame the individual, you're going to blame the so-called system or the society. If you're a conservative or somebody on the right, you're probably going to say that there's something wrong with these people's behavior that they can change. So in what is probably the central paragraph of the piece, Bailey writes, that is where the shame comes from, being treated as though you are sin personified for having the audacity to be poor in America. And every time you hear another politician preach the virtues of personal responsibility, as though those who are using government benefits are uniquely averse to such a thing, the shame deepens. The point that the author is missing is that the shame may not be a bad thing. If you and your family can't feed yourselves, you probably have some problems. And when you have some problems, you naturally have shame. Negative emotions are not always bad. Sometimes when someone makes you angry, that gives you the impetus to do something about the causes of that and fix the problem. Same way for shame. If you don't like being poor and you don't like being unable to feed yourself, maybe you'll learn something more, you'll go to college, you'll get a better job, you'll add some skills to your repertoire, and then one day you won't be poor anymore. Let's give a brief quote from Nietzsche. This is from the Genealogy of Morals, second essay, section 3. Nietzsche says, "If something is to stay in the memory, it must be burned in. Only that which never ceases to hurt stays in the memory." Coming at it from this perspective is to say that the shame that Bailey felt is not necessarily a bad thing. That shame might propel him to become something greater than he was. If you were a poor person who felt no shame for your social welfare entitlements, do you have much of an incentive to get off of them, to become something greater, to earn your own livelihood, to feed yourself and your family? Maybe not. So typical leftist stuff, we shouldn't make anyone feel ashamed for anything that they do. I live in a poor area, and quite often I'm in the grocery store and I'm seeing people and what they're buying with their food stamps. and it's not fruit and it's not vegetables. It is meat, chips, snacks, soda, all that good stuff that everybody likes. Bailey says here that there's no guarantee that banning soda from SNAP purchases will be more effective than trying to lower the cost of fresh fruits and vegetables and making them more widely available in the poorest communities. That is nothing but garbage. Anyone who wants to buy fresh fruits and vegetables can do it if they're motivated, and they can use the money on their food stamp card to do so, but they're not motivated to do that. The left tries to push issues of access when access is not the problem. If the people on food stamps wanted to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, then the market would provide those to them. And I'm nowhere near some type of big free market Republican or corporatist or one of those people who thinks that the market will solve every problem that we have. But I do know that people on food stamps want to buy potato chips, so therefore the market supplies potato chips. They're all over the place. They're in every bodega, every convenience store, every gas station, every grocery store, and people with an EBT card buy that stuff. If you could supply fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables that would be bought in those places by people with food stamp cards, then the stores would stock them. They do have perishable items in those places, so they could add these other items if they would sell, but they don't because people don't want to buy them. So to wrap this up, amongst the numerous problems in the story, Bailey is blaming society for his internal state. That's kind of a weak move. We should all take responsibility for how we feel and do something about it rather than trying to convince other people that they should change their behavior until we feel comfortable. That's a big problem. Second off, he, like many people on the left, are confusing motivation with access. It is the former and not the latter in this case. That's the real problem. Bailey is thinking that shame is always a problem. It's not always a problem, and I'm sure you can think of a lot of instances where leftists use shame to their advantage. I guess he's really just suggesting a double standard, that shame should only be employed against rich people. So I think Bailey's true motivation is to try to protect all the people that he identifies with and wants to protect. In this case, poor black people. He wants to protect them from criticism. He doesn't want them to feel shame, but it doesn't make sense because the people on the left typically use shame as one of their main tactics to try to change other people's behavior. They try to instill shame in others, and it's further complicated by the fact that white, Republican, middle-class people, especially the religious types, are often some of the most shame-ridden and guilt-ridden people around. A lot of it's religious and some of it's social. Okay, I'm getting off in the weeds on a completely different topic, so we'll just go ahead and stop here. Final assessment, 0 out of 10 for CNN, 0 out of 10 for Isaac Bailey.